Hello everyone, welcome back. We've got a brand new story to share with you, so let's begin. My name is Russell. The restraining order from my girlfriend didn't just end my relationship with her. It revealed how differently we had been interpreting 3 years that I thought represented love and partnership, but which she apparently saw as control and emotional abuse. Rather than fighting her allegations in court, I decided to give Amanda exactly what she claimed to want: complete freedom from my influence and support. Amanda and I met during our junior year at State University, where we connected over shared ambitions and other things. Amanda was studying marketing with a focus on consumer products, while I was concentrating on finance and operations management. And we often talked about how our complementary skills might someday allow us to work together on business ventures. After graduation, Amanda and I moved to the same city, but pursued separate career paths that reflected our individual strengths and interests. Through my uncle's connections in the financial services industry, I was able to land a position as an analyst at a regional investment firm that offered advancement opportunities and a starting salary that was significantly higher than what most recent graduates could expect in the labor market. Amanda, meanwhile, accepted a position as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized consumer goods company, where she gained valuable experience in product development, brand management, and retail marketing. Her salary was modest, but provided enough income for her to live independently while learning skills that would be valuable for the entrepreneurial ventures she had always planned to pursue. For the first 2 years after college, Amanda and I maintained separate apartments and financial independence while building our careers and enjoying the freedom and flexibility that came with being young professionals in a city that offered numerous opportunities for personal and professional growth. We would split expenses when we went out together, maintain our own savings accounts, and generally approach our relationship as a partnership between equals who were each responsible for their own financial well-being. But during our 3rd year together, Amanda began developing plans for starting her own business, creating a line of natural hair care products that would serve the specific needs of those who were looking for alternatives to chemically intensive treatments and styling products that dominated the mainstream beauty industry. Amanda had been researching this market opportunity for months, developing product formulations with the help of a cosmetic chemist, and creating business plans that outlined her strategy for manufacturing, marketing, and distributing her products. After going through Amanda's business concept, it was solid and represented a genuine market opportunity in an underserved segment of the beauty industry. She had identified specific problems with existing products, developed innovative solutions that addressed those problems, and created a compelling brand identity that would resonate with her target customers. I was impressed by the thoroughness of her planning and the passion she brought to the project. However, Amanda's savings from 2 years of work weren't sufficient to fund the startup costs associated with product development, manufacturing, packaging, marketing, and establishing distribution channels for her hair care line. She needed more money to launch her business properly, but she had only been able to save a bit while paying rent, student loans, and living expenses on her coordinator's salary. When Amanda asked if I would be willing to help fund her business launch, I was enthusiastic about supporting her entrepreneurial goals and confident that her venture had genuine potential for success. My income had grown significantly over the previous 2 years, and I had been saving aggressively with the goal of marrying her and eventually buying a house. I agreed to provide the funding Amanda needed for her business, structuring our arrangement as a combination of a business loan and personal support that would allow her to focus entirely on product development and marketing without worrying about basic living expenses during the crucial startup phase. I covered Amanda's rent, utilities, and personal expenses, while also providing capital for inventory, packaging, marketing materials, and other business costs. Initially, this financial arrangement worked well and seemed to strengthen our relationship by giving us shared goals and allowing me to contribute meaningfully to Amanda's success. Amanda was appreciative of my support, worked diligently on developing her products and building her brand, and seemed to be making good progress toward launching a sustainable business that could eventually provide her with the independence and creative fulfillment she had always wanted. But as months passed and Amanda's business development process extended longer than either of us had anticipated, I began noticing patterns in her spending behavior that created tension and disagreement between us. Amanda would make impulsive purchases of expensive items that weren't directly related to her business needs, then express stress and anxiety about being low on funds when it came time to pay for essential business expenses or personal obligations. These spending patterns became a recurring source of conflict as I tried to help Amanda understand the importance of budgeting and prioritizing expenses during the startup phase when cash flow was limited and every dollar needed to be allocated strategically. I would suggest that luxury purchases should be postponed until her business is generating revenue. But Amanda would argue that she deserves to enjoy some benefits from the financial support I was providing. The disagreements about Amanda's spending habits weren't just about money. They reflected deeper differences in our approaches to financial responsibility, goal setting, and the appropriate use of resources during a period when we were supposedly working together toward shared objectives. I viewed my support as an investment in Amanda's business and our future together, while Amanda seemed to view it as general financial assistance that she could use according to her own priorities and preferences. One particular incident that crystallized these tensions occurred when Amanda purchased a designer handbag that cost nearly $10,000, justifying the purchase by explaining that she needed to look successful and professional when meeting with potential retailers and investors for her business. When I pointed out that there were less expensive options that would serve the same professional purpose, Amanda became defensive and accused me of trying to control her choices and undermine her confidence. This argument about the handbag escalated into a broader discussion about our financial arrangement and the expectations that came with it. I tried to explain that my concern wasn't about controlling Amanda's choices, but about ensuring that our limited resources were being used strategically to support her business goals rather than being diverted to luxury purchases that didn't contribute to her long-term success. But Amanda interpreted my concerns about her spending as evidence that I was trying to control her behavior and limit her autonomy, and she became increasingly defensive about any suggestions I made regarding budgeting or financial priorities. What I thought were reasonable discussions about resource allocation, Amanda experienced as criticism and attempts to micromanage her decisions. The tension surrounding these financial disagreements began affecting other aspects of our relationship as Amanda became more sensitive to any comments or questions I made about money, spending, or business planning. She would accuse me of being controlling and unsupportive whenever I expressed concerns about expenses or suggested alternative approaches to achieving her goals. I tried to address these communication problems by focusing on my admiration for Amanda's business acumen and entrepreneurial drive while being more careful about how I expressed concerns about financial matters. I didn't want my support to become a source of conflict, and I was willing to adjust my approach to discussions about money if it would help preserve our relationship and Amanda's progress toward business success. But despite my efforts to be more diplomatic about financial discussions, Amanda's sensitivity to any questions about her spending continued to create friction between us. She seemed to interpret any interest I showed in how money was being used as evidence of controlling behavior, even when I was simply trying to understand how our shared resources were being allocated. The situation reached a breaking point during another argument about Amanda's expenses, this time involving her decision to book an expensive vacation with friends, a trip that would cost several $1,000s at a time when her business was behind schedule and over budget on several important development milestones. When I asked Amanda whether this was the right time for such a significant discretionary expense, given the challenges her business was facing, she exploded with anger and accused me of being emotionally abusive and financially controlling. Amanda claimed that I was using money as a weapon to manipulate her behavior and undermine her independence, and that my questions about her spending constituted a pattern of psychological abuse. I was shocked by the intensity of Amanda's reaction and the serious nature of her accusations. I genuinely believed that my financial support represented love and commitment rather than manipulation or control. The disconnect between my intentions and Amanda's interpretation of my behavior was so complete that I struggled to understand how we could be experiencing the same interactions so differently. But rather than continuing to argue about our different perspectives on what had been happening in our relationship, Amanda took the dramatic step of filing for a restraining order, claiming in legal documents that I had been emotionally abusive and controlling throughout our relationship, using financial support as a means of coercing and manipulating her behavior. When a restraining order was served at my office, I was blindsided by both the legal implications of Amanda's allegations and the realization that someone I loved and had been trying to support viewed me as an abuser rather than a partner. The restraining order didn't just end our romantic relationship. It created a legal framework that characterized me as a threat to Amanda's safety and well-being. Reading through the legal documents that outlined Amanda's allegations against me was one of the most devastating experiences of my adult life. The woman I had been planning to propose to had convinced a judge that I posed enough of a danger to her, that court-ordered separation was necessary to protect her from my allegedly abusive behavior. Amanda's legal filings described our financial arrangement as a pattern of coercive control, characterizing my questions about her spending as attempts to isolate and manipulate her. According to her petition, my efforts to discuss budgeting and financial priorities constituted emotional abuse designed to undermine her self-esteem and independence. After consulting with my own attorney about how to respond to Amanda's restraining order, I made a decision. I chose not to fight the allegations or contest the restraining order in court. If Amanda genuinely believed that I was an abuser whose presence in her life was harmful and dangerous, then the most loving thing I could do was respect her assessment and give her the complete freedom from my influence that she was seeking. My decision not to fight the restraining order wasn't based on an admission that Amanda's allegations were accurate, but on a recognition that our relationship had become so toxic and dysfunctional that separation was probably the best outcome for both of us. If Amanda experienced my financial support and concern about her spending as abusive control, then continuing that financial support would only perpetuate what she viewed as harmful behavior. Instead of anger or attempts at reconciliation, I chose to respond to Amanda's restraining order with systematic withdrawal from all the financial commitments and support systems that she had characterized as tools of abuse and control. I would give Amanda exactly what she claimed to want: complete independence from my financial influence and involvement in her life. The first step in this process was canceling the engagement plans that I had been developing in secret for several months. I had already purchased a ring, planned a romantic proposal, and coordinated with Amanda's best friend to ensure that the proposal would be a surprise that honored Amanda's preferences and personality. Canceling these plans and returning the engagement ring felt like acknowledging that the future I had been planning no longer existed. I also contacted the landlord for the commercial space that Amanda had been planning to lease for her business operations, a space that I had agreed to guarantee financially since Amanda's credit history and income weren't sufficient to qualify for the lease independently. Since my name was on the guarantee and I was legally responsible for the lease payments, I had the right to cancel the arrangement, which I did immediately after receiving the restraining order. Additionally, I began the process of withdrawing from all the shared financial commitments and support systems that had been funding Amanda's business development and personal expenses. I canceled credit cards that I had been paying for, closed joint accounts that provided Amanda with access to funds, and terminated automatic payments for her rent, utilities, and other recurring expenses. Rather than informing Amanda directly about these changes, which would have violated the restraining order's prohibition on contact, I simply allowed the natural consequences of my withdrawal to unfold according to their own timeline. Amanda would discover the changes when bills came due, when credit cards were declined, or when she tried to access accounts and services that were no longer available. I also instructed my attorney to send Amanda's lawyer a formal request for repayment of the money I had lent her for business development, personal expenses, and other costs that had been documented throughout our relationship. Since Amanda had characterized my financial support as abusive control, I wanted to formalize the business aspects of our arrangement and seek repayment according to standard commercial lending practices. The consequences of my systematic withdrawal from Amanda's financial support began manifesting within days of my decision to respect her request for independence. Amanda discovered that her business lease had been canceled when she went to sign the final paperwork, leaving her without the commercial space she had been counting on for manufacturing and retail operations. She would eventually find out that the credit card I gave her access to will decline when she attempts her routine purchases. And the automatic payments for her rent, utilities, and other essential expenses will stop processing, which would create immediate financial pressure that she apparently hadn't anticipated when she filed for the restraining order. Amanda's attempts to maintain her business operations and personal lifestyle without my financial support revealed how dependent she had become on resources that she had simultaneously characterized as tools of abuse and control. The independence she had claimed to want came with financial responsibilities that she wasn't prepared to handle alone. Within a week of my withdrawal from her financial support systems, Amanda's attorney contacted my lawyer with a dramatically different tone and set of requests than had characterized her restraining order petition. Instead of seeking protection from my allegedly abusive behavior, Amanda's lawyer was now asking for negotiations and suggesting that Amanda might be willing to reconsider the restraining order. Amanda's attorney described her client as someone who had overreacted to stress and relationship conflicts, implying that the allegations of emotional abuse had been exaggerated, and that Amanda was now interested in resolving our differences through discussion and compromise rather than legal separation. The change in tone from Amanda's legal representation was striking and revealed how quickly her perspective on our relationship had shifted once she experienced the reality of complete financial independence. The woman who had characterized my support as abusive control was now seeking to restore the financial arrangements she had claimed were harmful to her well-being. But my response to Amanda's attorney was calm and unwavering. Amanda had made her choice when she filed the restraining order, and I was simply respecting her decision by giving her the independence she had claimed to need. I had no interest in resuming a relationship with someone who viewed my support as abuse, and I would not be manipulated into returning to financial arrangements that had been characterized as coercive and harmful. My attorney reported that Amanda's lawyer seemed stunned by my refusal to negotiate or consider reconciliation, apparently having expected that I would jump at the opportunity to restore our relationship once Amanda indicated willingness to withdraw her allegations. But I had moved beyond the point where Amanda's change of heart could undo the damage that had been done to my trust and respect for her character. The legal demand for repayment of the money I had lent Amanda proceeded according to standard collection practices, with my attorney providing detailed documentation of all the financial support I had provided throughout our relationship. Amanda's claims that this support had been gifts rather than loans were undermined by text messages and emails, where she had explicitly promised to repay the money afterwards. As the reality of her financial situation became clear, Amanda began making increasingly desperate attempts to restore our previous arrangements, even while the restraining order technically prohibited direct contact between us. She would have mutual friends reach out on her behalf, send messages through her attorney, and find other indirect ways to communicate her regret about filing the restraining order and her desire to rebuild our relationship. But Amanda's expressions of regret felt more like responses to the financial consequences of her decisions, rather than genuine remorse about the allegations she had made or recognition that her characterization of my behavior had been unfair and inaccurate. I suspected that if I restored financial support without addressing the underlying issues that had led to the restraining order, we would simply return to the same dysfunctional patterns that had created problems in our relationship. Moreover, Amanda's willingness to make serious allegations of emotional abuse in legal documents, only to withdraw those allegations when the financial consequences became uncomfortable, revealed aspects of her character that made me question whether she was someone I could trust with a kind of vulnerability that marriage and lifelong partnership require. The process of extracting myself from Amanda's financial dependence took several months and required careful documentation of all the support I had provided throughout our relationship. My attorney was able to recover a certain percentage of the money I had lent to Amanda, though significant portions of my financial support were classified as gifts or living expenses that couldn't be recovered through legal action. The financial loss was significant but manageable, and I viewed it as tuition for an expensive education about the importance of maintaining clear boundaries and expectations in relationships where financial support is involved. I had learned that generosity without accountability can create resentment and dependency that ultimately damages relationships rather than strengthening them. Amanda's attempts to rebuild her business without my financial support were unsuccessful, and according to mutual friends, she eventually abandoned her entrepreneurial plans and returned to traditional employment in the marketing field. Her natural hair care products never dominated the market, and the commercial opportunities she had been developing were lost. The restraining order that was meant to protect Amanda from my allegedly abusive behavior had instead separated her from the financial support and business guidance that had been essential to her entrepreneurial success. In seeking legal protection from what she characterized as control and manipulation, Amanda had given up the resources and partnerships that were necessary for achieving the independence and success she claimed to want. 6 months after the restraining order was issued, Amanda's attorney made a final attempt to negotiate some kind of financial settlement or ongoing support arrangement, acknowledging that Amanda was struggling financially and professionally without the assistance I had been providing. But my response remained the same. Amanda had made her choice when she characterized my support as abuse, and I would not be drawn back into a relationship that had proven to be destructive for both of us. The experience taught me important lessons about the difference between supporting someone's goals and enabling their irresponsible behavior, and about the importance of maintaining clear expectations and boundaries, even in relationships characterized by love and generosity. Amanda's inability to distinguish between financial accountability and emotional abuse had revealed fundamental differences in our values and communication styles that would have created ongoing problems in marriage. I learned that genuine partnership requires mutual respect for each other's perspectives and willingness to address conflicts through honest communication rather than legal action. Amanda's decision to resolve our disagreements through a restraining order rather than continued discussion showed that she wasn't interested in the kind of collaborative problem-solving that successful relationships require. Most importantly, I discovered that sometimes the most loving response to someone's request for independence is to grant it completely, even when that independence comes with consequences they didn't anticipate. Amanda's restraining order had given me permission to prioritize my own well-being over her financial needs, and that permission had ultimately protected me from further involvement in a relationship that wasn't healthy for either of us. The months following my withdrawal from Amanda's life allowed me to gain perspective on the warning signs I had missed during our relationship and to understand how financial support can become a source of conflict when it's not balanced with clear expectations and mutual accountability. I had been so focused on helping Amanda achieve her goals that I had ignored signs that she viewed my assistance as an entitlement rather than a gift. I also recognized that my own approach to financial support had sometimes been paternalistic and controlling, even though that hadn't been my intention. Amanda's sensitivity to questions about spending had been partly justified, as I had sometimes asked about her financial decisions in ways that implied disapproval rather than simply seeking understanding or offering guidance. The experience helped me develop a more nuanced understanding of how money can affect relationship dynamics, and how financial support can create power imbalances that damage intimacy and mutual respect, even when both partners have good intentions. In future relationships, I would be more careful about maintaining financial boundaries that preserve equality and independence rather than creating dependency that breeds resentment. Years after the restraining order was issued and subsequently allowed to expire, I occasionally received updates about Amanda through mutual friends, though I was careful not to seek out information about her life or encourage others to share details about her situation. According to these reports, Amanda did struggle financially after losing my support, and had not been successful in establishing the independence and success she had claimed to want. But Amanda's struggles were no longer my responsibility or concern, and I felt no guilt about the consequences of her decision to characterize my support as abuse and seek legal protection for my involvement in her life. She had been given exactly what she asked for, and the results of that freedom were hers to manage. Looking back on the restraining order that ended my relationship with Amanda, I realized that her allegations of emotional abuse had actually protected me from continuing to invest in someone who would have created ongoing financial and emotional problems throughout our marriage. Her inability to distinguish between accountability and control had revealed character traits that would have made a successful partnership impossible. The financial support that Amanda had characterized as abusive control had actually been the foundation for whatever success and stability she had experienced during our relationship. When that support was withdrawn, the reality of her spending habits and financial irresponsibility became immediately apparent in ways that confirmed my concerns had been justified rather than controlling. The storm that Amanda had created with her restraining order had ultimately washed away a relationship that was built on unsustainable financial arrangements and incompatible values about responsibility and partnership. By stepping out of that storm rather than fighting it, I had protected myself from further damage and given myself the opportunity to build relationships based on mutual respect and genuine compatibility. The woman who had claimed I was emotionally abusive for questioning her spending had discovered that genuine independence requires the financial discipline and personal responsibility she had been unwilling to develop while relying on my support. Her restraining order had protected me from someone who would have been a financial and emotional liability throughout our marriage, and for that protection, I remained grateful.